Okay, well, welcome everybody to the CISO Sandbox webinar. Today we have a different and extremely special and extremely awesome episode that we're going to be presenting to you. We're going a little bit off of the typical script here. We have with us today who will be essentially our host is Hawks Hunt's own CTO and co-founder, Pyry Åvist.
Nice to meet you all. Nice to be here.
And joining Pyry and myself is Chris Castaldo, the CISO of Crossbeam and the author of Startup Secure, which if you're here, you probably have some kind of an interest in baking cybersecurity into your startup from founding to exit. This is the man who wrote the book on it, and it's an awesome book. It really does have just incredibly useful information laid out in a very digestible and applicable way. So Chris, great to have you here.
Awesome. So excited. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to be taking a backseat today, but I had to tell one story about this show, how it came together, which was kind of funny. So Chris and I have been talking for a while. I'd wanted to talk to Chris for quite some time about his book. I just really appreciated his mission. I appreciated what he's doing and who he's doing it for here. And after months of some back and forth, we decided to do a show, got a date together. And within a day or two of that, Pyry reached out to me just over Slack and said, "Hey, Elliot, there's this guy I would just love to talk to. And his name's Chris Castaldo. And do you think there's any way that maybe we could arrange a show with him?" And so here we are. And the force is strong between the CISO and the CTO. So it's pretty funny how things can work out that way. And that's really what this is about too, is because the CISO Sandbox, the reason why we have conversations in here is that we're trying to get to the people side of cybersecurity. But one group of people we haven't really spoken to so much is the founders, the people who are developing these different startups that are growing into, unicorn companies, or just growing into just a nice viable business. It's all something, whatever size you're scaling up to, cybersecurity is a vital part of it. And I'm just myself happy to sit back here and hear this conversation. So first, Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book and who you wrote it for.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the kind words. So like you mentioned, I'm the CISO at Crossbeam. That's my day job. I also happen to be an author and also advise several other startups, including SafeBase, Took, and Balkan ID. So yeah, try to give back to the community as much as possible, and this is my way to hopefully give back to founders. I initially wrote the book for founders, going through all the lists of top 10 books every founder should read. I read through all those, and not a single one talked about security, even in the slightest. Maybe general risk, but not about security. And I kept seeing kind of the same problem over and over again as I would move from startup to startup or working with founders one-on-one. Just the same questions kept coming up. So I figured let's make a resource for them. I've been really surprised though to get feedback from people that I didn't think would read the book, being my peers, other CISOs, security practitioners. I guess kind of my perspective and my scar tissue over the years of building cybersecurity programs, different perspective. So it's really nice to hear from peers and people that I respect. Said, "Oh yeah, I got this. This is great. Different way to think about doing this in security." VCs as well. I was really surprised to hear VCs picking up the book. And reading it and trying to apply some of that stuff either in their portcos or doing due diligence. So yeah, it's been an awesome journey. We just passed the year mark from it being published. So yeah, it's been a good ride so far.
Hey, that's awesome. And Pyry, I'm going to turn it over to you now. And I think that one thing about this week for us that is really especially germane to this conversation is that we have some pretty big news to share. And baking cybersecurity into every step of the way includes fundraising rounds too, I think, and the growth that comes along with that. So Pyry, take it away. What's going on and how are you doing? And what kind of questions do we have for Chris?
Thank you, Elliot. Well, yeah, I have a lot of questions, and of course, we had exciting news or announcing our B round. So Hoxhunt raised 40 million dollars to kind of accelerate our growth and especially expansion in US. So like super excited about that. A lot of the investments is going to go, of course, as with any startup, to growth and the product, but cybersecurity will be a focus point for us as well. So we are, of course, a cybersecurity company, and the old joke that does a kind of shoe gobblers kids even have legs. So unfortunately, we need to have legs and shoes as well. So invest into that. But hey, Chris, let's start from the very basics. So when do you think, or why is it important for founders to start thinking about cybersecurity, like from very early on when founding the company?
It's like any other business risk, right? You're starting a company, that's a risk. You're taking a risk. You're building a product, selling into maybe a new market you've never operated in. So really, it's all about taking the right risks at the right time and being aware of those risks. Maybe it's something you're not going to address today or tomorrow or next year, but you should still be aware of it, right? Just same on the financial side, right? Like you need to have good accounting and bookkeeping from the beginning. You also need to have good legal advice from the beginning, right? You're writing your terms of service. You want to make sure you're protecting the business and giving fair terms to your customers. It's same thing for security, right? That really needs to be at the start. I don't think anyone can go a single day without seeing some type of security event in the news, regardless of the outlet you choose. Like everyone's talking about it now. And if you're not getting the questions from your investors, you're going to be getting them from your customers. And really the market is going to kind of help dictate when to start investing in those things and when to start implementing different processes. So if you look at it from, very, very early, pre-seed, seed stage, sure, you're not going to go out and buy a SIM at that point, right? A security event incident management platform, right? Three founders, that's not going to happen, right?
Exactly.
But you can implement MFA on all of your email accounts, right? You're probably building these things in personal accounts on personal devices. So it's really imperative to understand those things at a basic level. Don't need to be an engineer, but so many tools we use today, especially on the SaaS side, at least give you some capabilities to turn on security, whether it's on by default or not.
And who do you think, like, whose responsibility it should be in a startup? Like, who's kind of should be thinking about security? Like, if you think about the traditional mix of the founder, you have the CEO, maybe the technical co-founder. So who should be thinking about security?
It should be that whole founding team, right? Even if it's not your responsibility. I mean, that's how most startups work, right? Like people wear multiple hats. You can't be in the business of it's not my job, it's not my responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility. Yes, you might have one security engineer, or maybe you have a CISO or head of security. But at the end of the day, it's everyone's responsibility at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. I fully agree. And I think like one of the things you kind of mentioned quite well, that like there's these books and maybe like lectures where you kind of watch like what should every founder look for. Like for example, Y Combinator has like a excellent startup school and kind of videos out there, but there's no recording about like cybersecurity. From personal experience, I think like if you think about, you have this business canvas where you do kind of business planning for your startup, but I think like looking at, for example, the data privacy regulation right now, it's actually quite important for you to understand, okay, can you manage, how can you run your business on a way that you meet the regulation? Well, especially here in Europe, we have GDPR, which kind of sets quite hard limits to you. So kind of any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it really changes and impacts different businesses if you're B2C or B2B. Obviously, B2C, you're probably going to be working with a lot of PII. So
Yeah.
GDPR definitely something to make sure either you're thinking about or you're retaining outside counsel, right? If you're not at the stage to have, an internal GC just yet, general counsel inside the organization. So it's really diving into what is your business, what is the data you're going to have, and that's really kind of what I try to walk through. That very easy framework in the book is start with the data inside your business, right? That helps you
Yeah.
build out everything else and really understand, okay, what protections do I need to have in place? It also helps you get an advantage over the attackers, right? That's your pretty much primary advantage is you should really know what data you have and where it is, right? So starting at that point, working out to the systems that it's on, and then finally the people or services or processes that have access to those systems and data. That's really makes it a lot more manageable, especially for a
Yeah.
small founding team to say, okay, we're going to build our product in Azure, and it's going to be B2C. We're going to have a whole bunch of PII names, addresses,
Mm.
email. Okay, like what are some basic things? At least encrypt the database, right? Like
Exactly.
you can't get more simplistic than that.
Yeah.
And you step out and say, okay, well, we're encrypting it, right? We're using a key, Azure, all these platforms, GCP, AWS, they all provide some mechanism to secure the key, to encrypt the data. So what's the security around that? Who has access to the key? And then, okay, that person has to log into something, right? They've got to log into
Exactly.
that platform. They've got to log into maybe their company device to be able to access those things. And then you're able to really hone in on specific security controls and not try to boil the ocean, right? Because you start looking at this topic and you can go down so many rabbit holes where
Exactly.
it feels unmanageable and unattainable, really, which I think is the wrong way to look at it. And I think that's a little bit of cybersecurity's fault of
Yeah.
making it so complex. So I'm hoping we can change that.
Yeah, for sure. And then thinking about like kind of from our like history when we started to grow and like started to acquire quite large enterprise customers, I kind of started noticing I'm sitting in like compliance calls a lot, like several hours calls going through our stack, how we do things. And kind of at that point, we as a company decided to invest into a kind of external audit. So we kind of went through kind of SOC 2 process for us. And we felt that even though the controls, and I actually there, I think quite reasonable. So there's not too much red tape, and you can implement in a kind of a way that doesn't like interfere with your kind of wanting to move fast. And I think like it has really paid back for us. But if you think about from the early stage, maybe kind of having that kind of audited SOC 2 or some other certificate isn't the way. Like how can you kind of what would you recommend for founders, like if they start implementing these controls, how to document that, how to kind of keep that you then eventually at some point you're ready for maybe kind of this kind of external validated certificate.
That is so important for your go-to-market teams, right? That's kind of the two things I see in most startups, right? You've got engineering and sales, right? Those are
Yeah.
kind of the two biggest components of an organization, of a startup,
And
especially in B2B, right?
yeah.
So making sure that stuff's really aligned to make that process easier for those sales folks that are coming up against those questions.
Yeah.
You can absolutely sell into enterprise as a B2B without SOC 2, without ISO, but like you said, you have to have other things. So really technical documentation, some type of white paper that lays out your cybersecurity program, the controls you have in place. That's going to be something, at least at a minimum, those procurement teams are going to look for. And I'm thinking of like a Fortune 1000, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to sell into a very large enterprise. You're going to be talking to a procurement team that's probably 4 or 5 different teams inside the organization, right? You've got your buyer, right? You've got the person that wants to buy the thing you're selling,
Yeah.
but now you've got to sell that product another 3 or 4 times, right? You've got to
Yeah.
sell it to legal. Maybe you have to sell it to their separate privacy team. You might have to sell it separately again to their cybersecurity team, right? So making sure you're kind of consolidating all their concerns, their requests into a single, quickly digestible document is super helpful. There's platforms out there that let you basically put up this trust portal that's kind of red, green, yellow stoplight type thing.
Yeah.
It shows
Exactly.
you here's our security program, right?
Yeah.
No one's perfect. People are not infallible, so you can't expect zero risk. So making sure you're addressing those things and it's clear where the business is taking risks, where you're not. That goes a really, really long way. And just getting some of those basics in place. I
Exactly.
kind of look at it and talk about it in the book. It's kind of your digital, house, right? You
Yeah.
go house shopping, right? Your digital curb appeal, so to speak.
Yeah.
So let's say you're house shopping, you go to look at a house and you pull up, the grass is 1.5 feet high, the shutters are falling off, the siding's falling off. You can kind of assume what the inside might look like, right?
Exactly.
And there's things on the outside of your organization, making sure you've got proper security headers on your website. You've got SPF and DMARC set up, the things that someone can go out and very quickly look at online and do open source research on your organization.
Exactly.
Of course, like just because you have DMARC doesn't mean you're fully secure and fully compliant, but it's one of many pieces, right?
Exactly.
There's so many layers to cybersecurity. So I think that's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah, fully agree. And actually, like from our data, looking at marketing data, and like once we put our like security page and like how we do things, that's actually a very popular page. So like when buyers come, they kind of like, it's almost like they can't buy software if the company isn't taking the security kind of seriously enough and being open about it. So I think that's something kind of, as you said, it's kind of low hanging fruit, and you no need to go all the way with the kind of like having a very expensive ISO 27K cert, but you can do the basics. And the kind of platforms you mentioned, like many startups have these status pages. So you have like a status page for your app, what is the uptime. You should have a kind of a similar page for your, let's say, your kind of security posture. So I think that makes total sense. Yeah. And then regarding like, let's go into kind of the one of the important questions I have in this maybe for scale. So when should you hire a CISO to your startup? When should you do that?
So there's a couple questions that you have to ask yourself, the founding team of the business, starting with the data, right? Are you developing, let's say, the next cancer treatment, right? It's going to eliminate some type of cancer. Once that information has been lost, it's not something you just go create another instance of, right? It's not like spinning up an instance of compute in AWS. If something's compromised, you kill a Docker image, you start a new one, and you keep moving. Once you lose that IP, it's gone, right? So I think understanding the gravity of what your organization is building and what the product is, what the value creation is, should be a really quick indicator of when you need to have that in place. So that's probably a good way to tell, should we hire someone now? Should we outsource it? There's tons of consulting firms out there that have basically a bench of CISOs that have retired and have kind of seen everything and have all the scar tissue that you can kind of learn from and learn from their mistakes or learn from the incidents that they've been through. So that's probably right out of the gate, right? The next one would be kind of funding round. And I'd say right around the A and B round is probably a good point, right? So if you look at it compared to your go-to-market, right? Pre-seed, seed, you're probably dealing with really friendly customers, lighthouse customers, friends and family, folks that are willing to, kind of take on more risk by working with your business, maybe as a design partner or something like that.
Yeah.
That well eventually runs dry,
Yeah.
and you're going to start selling into, you know, completely greenfield companies you have zero relationship with, and you've got, you know, an SDR working on it for a year, and you finally get a demo call, and then they start asking really hard security questions, and they start
Yeah.
asking, where's your SOC 2? Where's your pen test? Who's the qualified person that's responsible for security at your organization? So they're going to start asking those pointing questions. So the market will tell you really quickly. That seems to happen around the A/B round.
Yeah.
And then employee size could be the third one. Around the 100-person mark is probably kind of the last possible point.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example at Crossbeam. I was employee 49.
Okay.
So anywhere in that 50 to 100 person range would kind of be the other indicator. So the data you have, your funding round, employee count, I think are the really easiest ones for a founder to wrap their head around and compare it to their business, right? Uh-oh, did we
Looks like
lose him?
Pyry might have gotten frozen here. So
Hopefully that was the answer he wanted.
I think it was so great, it just blew up the internet. Is what
Yeah.
happened there. Hey, I have a follow. I know that he has loads more questions, so I won't intrude on Pyry's turf. But I have a question myself that I was going to ask. But first, I would also tell the audience again that if you guys want to ask questions, feel free to jump in anytime. And we have Pyry back. I will then save my question for later.
Perfect.
Pyry, turning it back over to you.
Thank you. Sorry, I immediately had a little bit of connection problem there. So coming back to the kind of CISO, so like and when to hire a CISO. So how about like should CISO be the first dedicated security role in a company, or would you kind of first look at people's focusing on maybe product security, or how would you kind of build that out?
I would say it depends on, you know, the classic security answer. It depends really on what you're building.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the world I live in, B2B SaaS, that's pretty easy. If your team doesn't have that skill set, probably engineering should be that first hire. If you're able to find a CISO that kind of did the engineering side and then transitioned, like myself. So I kind of get that side of the world. Yes, I can't jump in and write Python or Clojure or something like that. But you know, I know what EDR is. I know what vulnerability management is. I know the kind of the order in which things need to be set up. So there's kind of two different paths you can take there. If you're building B2B SaaS product, I think the engineering side, unless you have it in house already, is probably kind of the first critical hire to make sure you're getting those building blocks in place.
Yeah.
If it's all on the sales side, if you're constantly getting questions about your security, obviously someone that's familiar with your RevOps team or sales, and they get those steps and processes. Maybe someone at the kind of head of security level or CISO level, because those are also two different roles. CISO would traditionally report to either CEO, maybe a CTO, but I think that's kind of changing pretty quickly. Head of security definitely would typically report into CTO, CIO, maybe GC if you have general counsel in house. It's really important to make sure there's that delineation of duties and responsibilities and conflicts of interest, right?
Exactly.
If you're trying to move fast, build a product really quickly, you still need to have someone looking out to make sure we're making the right risks decisions, right? So if that individual doesn't feel empowered to, you know, speak up and say something, sometimes it could be a conflict if that person sits in engineering, but you know, it's all based on their personality, the company's culture, how much you embrace security. Because you know, some place it is just a checkbox, right? It's something they need to close sales deals, and that's legitimate, right? That is a role. Not everyone needs a giant security team. Not everyone needs a CISO, really, right?
Exactly, and I think like with proper pre-planning and taking that into consideration when building or taking security into consideration when building the product, you can actually kind of reduce the need for at some point, like you need to bring a lot of people to fix the problem. So if you're kind of early on looking at like, okay, how can we bake security into the product at every level and kind of bringing it to a daily life of the developers, then it becomes like not something huge, but actually just like a standard part as it kind of should be. So how about like your kind of best practices on like if you're in a point that, hey, now you have brought in a kind of senior security lead into the company, so how could kind of the engineering lead, whether it's kind of CTO or whatever is the role title, work together with security team? You kind of mentioned that they might be better that the kind of head of security or the CISO reports maybe directly to the CEO, or if you have a CIO but not maybe to the CTO. So what would be your like recommended working model there?
Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure everyone's focused on the same goal, and those
Yeah,
things are aligned to whatever the business goal is, right? If
yeah,
it's increasing ARR, if it's delivering some feature in the product, if it's building out something very specific for a lighthouse customer you're trying to close, whatever that is, making sure both of those are aligned, right? So if it's we need to close this giant enterprise deal, well, here's the security things we need to have in place.
yeah,
And typically that person may or may not be able to go click the buttons themselves, might rely on the SRE or the DevOps team, which again would typically sit in engineering. So making sure those two individuals are constantly communicating. Right, most of us are, a lot of us are, not most, a lot of us are remote these days.
yeah,
I work at a remote first company, right? We were never really in an office. But making sure that relationship is really tight from the start. And I think that kind of goes for anyone else on the executive team, right? If you're that first security hire, making sure you're really aligned with the legal team, right? You're going to have to come in and provide advice most likely on terms, right? When
yeah,
someone sends back your terms of service and the whole document is read, right?
yeah,
They're going to need your expertise on specific security requests that they ask for, and same with them. They're going to provide advice back to you of what's reasonable and not reasonable to accept when it comes to liability or something. So I think it's really focused on that relationship building, not just with the CTO or their technical peer, but the whole executive team, right? Sales, marketing, everyone needs to be involved. Like we were talking about earlier, it's not just that one person's responsibility. Maybe they're the accountable one, right?
yeah,
But everyone's responsible.
for sure. How about like kind of like looking at like security and ROI, kind of of investments, and like in many companies are very metrics driven. So kind of, for example, like what are the, let's say, the metrics at your current, let's say, kind of a job or some previous jobs, you kind of run a report, okay, why we are investing into security, okay, what is the value coming out of that? So any kind of thoughts on that?
So again, I've worked at so many B2B startups, right? The
Yeah, yeah,
main pretty much the main goal every time is
yeah,
ARR, right?
yeah,
So annual recurring revenue. So making sure we're supporting that, right?
yeah,
Security is an operations role, right? It's the same as legal. It's the same as people team, HR, right? We are supporting the business's operations. Caveat that with, like, if you're a cybersecurity company, probably different, right? You're part of the product, it's
yeah,
part of the sales process. But most of us are just supporting the business, right? People
yeah,
aren't buying our thing because of security, right? They're
yeah,
buying it because it solves some other problem or business gap that they have.
yeah,
So I think it's really critical to have that really alignment back to sales, right? And when I think about metrics, um, no one really cares about how many phishing emails we blocked, how many things our EDR detected and blocked. They're really looking for, I believe, is how we're supporting the business, right? And you can kind of look at the same thing, right? What are the metrics you look at with a legal team? What are the metrics you look at
Yeah.
with people operations? And really trying to align to that stuff, because there really isn't a specific concrete KPI that I
Yeah.
would go and use, because you end up, I think, sometimes going down a rabbit hole of trying to create metrics.
Yeah.
There's a really great book I love. There's two books I really love. One that's for metrics, one that's against metrics. The Tyranny of Metrics, really great book. And I've seen security teams so many times create metrics for the sake of creating metrics, and it's really easy to game those, right? When you've created them and you control them, it's not as valuable to the business, right? So I look at things like, okay, how quickly are deals that make it to security, that have security questions, how quickly are we getting those through that step
Yeah.
in the process, right? That's really important, right? Like, I think if there's any founders on here, every single one of them have probably heard "time kills all deals," right?
Yeah.
So making sure that hot potato is not in my hands, right? Moving it as
Yeah.
quickly as possible, right? So that's a metric I track internally. We don't like report that to the board again, because it's a supporting metric, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's again making sure we're not creating things to just create things.
Yeah, and I fully agree. And like for us, like the investments we have done for our internal security posture, it has always come back, and it definitely has speeded up deals. And of course, we are on the same segment, B2B cybersecurity sales. So, and our like buyers are the kind of security team, so they will like make sure that everything is done quite properly. So, so having proper compliance and kind of having a process to kind of answer those, and investing into that okay, there are like certain controls early on our kind of route we didn't have in place, and had to do investments to kind of get those controls in place. It has kind of speeded up the deals. Like one of the typically, at least from my perspective, is one of the most let's say, other than price disc negotiation, etc., one of the most kind of at least in Europe, when we're talking about GDPR, and there's like a lot of interpretation what things mean there. If you have good materials, good process, good answers, it actually can make a huge difference in that kind of time to close. So kind of highly recommend kind of and you can start like having a small process there, not even without the security team, or you must probably in the beginning, but it has been a hugely valuable to us. Then if we go to kind of like some of the current events, so I think like right now there's kind of a lot of messaging coming out of the at least VC community that everyone should tighten the belts and be ready for. There's gonna be like, you need to survive with the previous round the next 12 to 24 months, and you need to cut and reduce the spending to maximize runway for startups. Kind of any thoughts on like, okay, if budget needs to be cut across the kind of board in the company, kind of how would you approach as a CISO like kind of this kind of request, and would you kind of argument against it, like no way, we're not going to cut everything, like, or how would you approach it?
So I also think it's the same bucket as security, being
Yeah.
having fiduciary responsibility to the business. That's
Yeah.
also everyone's responsibility, and making sure we're being really smart with spending. I think that applies in good times and bad, right? Like even if you're not belt tightening, not having some insane burn rate is always looked on favorably from investors. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of always universally accepted. If someone has to cut, I think it's really easy to start if you have certifications, right? That's a really good spot to start and look at what have we committed to in those certifications, right?
Yeah.
So stepping back, then looking at your deals, looking at the terms you've agreed to, most of them will say something along the lines of you won't diminish security. So if you've put it into your certification, it's been used as evidence. it's probably going to be really difficult to terminate that contract if you don't have some type of mitigating control in place for whatever risk that thing is addressing, right? Whether it's vulnerability management or EDR, endpoint detection response. I wouldn't recommend removing either of those, even in super belt tightening times. But that's a really easy place to start. See, okay, what's auxiliary? What are nice to haves? What are things that are putting us maybe ahead of competition if you're using maybe security as a value add versus, maybe you're in a really crowded space, right? And you need to have some type of differentiator in the sales process. Well, if your whole sales team, every single call you go and listen to, if you're using one of those recording apps, which most sales teams do, and every single salesperson mentions, this security tool that you have in place, maybe you don't remove that one. I think this also goes for having really great relationships with your vendors to start. Obviously, they don't want to reduce your spend, right? That doesn't look good from the investor standpoint. But making sure you've built really great relationship with your vendors to maybe get creative in some way. If you really have to reduce burn, that's really important. So there's the cutting side, and then there's, okay, vendor X, help me keep you, but reduce spend, right? For shortened period of time, right? And there's always going to be downturns. That's how the market works. I'm sure we'll have an upside swing at some point, and then everyone will make their money back again, and sign big 3-year deals. But that's kind of where I would start to make sure. Where we've committed to things contractually, right? You don't want to go backwards on that stuff. And then, what can your vendors do, right? Most of us work with 10 plus security vendors at any given time. So it's a lot.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing, like for us, looking at the kind of our last funding round and some of the previous discussions, I think it is so important. At least like looking at our first funding round back in kind of 2016 to this one, I think like from the due diligence, security was at least over half of the kind of things that we did, and data privacy. So what would be your kind of advice on terms of like kind of how does this matter to the fundraising? So at least for us, it mattered quite a lot. So do you think this is quite universal going forward, that you need to have things in place?
I don't see the universalness of it. Every VC seems very different on the level of due diligence they do and what they care about. I've not seen one single pattern, right? At least from my experience, it's been all over the map. Some people dig in, some ask no questions. It's really interesting. Again, we all make risk-based decisions, right? Whether you're investing money or building a product or trying to secure a product, right? My risk tolerance is different than your risk tolerance, right? And same with someone that's going to invest $5 million or $100 million. So I've not seen a very specific pattern there. Is it better to have it? I would say so. But is it going to help you close that round? Unless the VC really, really cares about it, I think most people in cybersecurity right now have plenty of folks still knocking on doors. I saw like three or four funding announcements this morning. Just starting the day. So that at least for cybersecurity doesn't seem to be drying up anytime soon. I'm sure there's an end to that tunnel at some point.
Yeah, let's see. We're of course will kind of hoping kind of that cybersecurity would be recession proof or at least more resistant. But like if there's going to be budget cuts across the board, it's going to affect, of course, eventually everybody. And I guess like the same thing with kind of the funding round is the same as like closing the sales. You will not get the kind of yes from the cybersecurity posture of your company. That will come from the metrics, what your growth has been. But it will, of course, speed the due diligence if you have things in good order, data privacy, especially like GDPR, at least if you're a European founder, is something that the investors, especially US investors, because they might not be too aware of like, okay, how the GDPR works. So they are quite listening the kind of the risks, what the lawyers are saying that could happen if there's a GDPR breach. So at least that showed to us that, okay, for us that we kind of have done like quite a lot of work around it, so we could kind of prove, like, I guess like everyone says that you can't be GDPR like compliant because no one knows what that means, but you can be GDPR ready.
Right.
so at least for European companies, that is quite, it seems to be. And for our customers, very big thing typically when we make deals is like, it's all about, okay, where the data goes, kind of where physically it locates, and kind of who has the access, and etc. So that's a kind of something that, as you said in the beginning, like start from the data. So that's something I would definitely understand as a founder, and kind of map it out to be able to explain it to everyone who is asking. On the data privacy side, like kind of you of course have operated in the US. What is your thinking about, like, I think in California there's a kind of some regulation. Do you think that's going to be kind of tightening across in the US, or like is there going to be like something like GDPR in US, or how does that seem at the moment?
It seems like we're trending to almost a balkanization of it. I think there's a few states also considering their own privacy laws. At least for the consumer side, it might be more beneficial if we just have a federal regulation, but you know, at the speed of government, that could be a ways off. So I think it's actually going to raise the barrier of entry to the market for startups in the U.S. if more of these states start creating bespoke privacy laws. I already see it, talking with other friends that work at remote-only companies. Hiring remote is very complex, right? Each state in the U.S., you've got to set up an entity and legal requirements and taxes. There's quite a bit of legwork, which now we're seeing startups popping up to help facilitate, setting that up to hire people, in a state where the company is not founded. Same for, outside of the U.S. and different countries. It's getting more complex, and I think that's going to add to the complexity for founders as they're building their organizations. So, on one side, it's great. I love that we're protecting consumer data. We should have been doing it for years and years. But we also don't want to negatively impact the market and the speed at which we can get the goods and services that we want, right? We enjoy a lot of amazing things because of SaaS. So I don't think we want to slow that down too much. Again, we were talking earlier about how do you work with a CTO, right? And I think the industry really needs to step up and work with their local lawmakers, right? These folks can't be experts in every single thing that they are expected to write laws on, right? Like many obviously come with a law background, some don't. But they can't all be cybersecurity experts. They can't all be privacy experts. So I think the industry kind of needs to meet them halfway and say, okay, here's kind of how this works. Here's what you're suggesting. Here's how it's going to impact businesses. Here's how it's going to impact people working in your state for those businesses, or those businesses even being able to hire in that state. So I think we've got to. It can't just be someone else's problem, right?
Exactly.
And work together.
And especially with the data, I fully appreciate, like, especially here in Europe, GDPR has like turned the attitudes toward data. So previously it was something you would kind of accumulate as much as you can as a company. Now it's more like almost like nuclear, like uranium. It's powerful, but it's also harmful. You don't want to kind of hold on it like unless you have to. So I think it's a good attitude to analyze what data do you really need to run the business, and to kind of be able to kind of justify that I need to collect this data. But I feel that it's becoming a little bit of like a barrier, as you mentioned, like a barrier to entry, kind of barrier to innovation. Because for us, example, we have agreements with our kind of enterprise customers. If we want to have a new service, we see some nice SaaS solution, we would like to test part of our platform to kind of drive more value to our customers. It's actually quite big process to get that approved across our customers. So it's becoming like a little bit of like kind of a hindrance on innovation in my mind. And like I think GDPR and these regulations, they almost feel like this kind of you know how you have like a steel tariff to block, let's say, kind of steel imported from certain country. So it's something I hope that in future we could have like a kind of WTO or World Trade Organization level, a kind of deal about data across countries, because it's from a technology perspective right now to build a global SaaS product where you can enroll customers globally. It's and keep that performant. It's not too easy. Like previously, you could just replicate the data everywhere. So your users come from Philippines or US, they will get it nearby. It's fast. Now you have regulation. Okay, this user's data needs to be binned in this geolocation. So kind of you need to really think how you build your platform and the data. So it's becoming more complex for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think could be creating an unnecessary risk for that data itself, right?
Yeah.
If you're housing it specifically in one geolocation, right? We can't predict what's going to happen in the world from day to day. I don't think anyone. I'm sure someone was able to kind of see the writing on the wall with the war in Ukraine,
Exactly.
but that's always going to continue, right? That's human nature. There's unfortunately always going to be wars, and if suddenly that data center physically no longer exists,
Exactly.
where can the data be backed up to, right? So I think we really have to have smart, again, goes back to industry needs to be involved here. They need to be stepping up and making sure they're working with lawmakers to make a law that both protects our data in both standpoints, right? From the privacy side and from the resilience side, right? So much of our lives are online now. You know, if the internet went off, like everyone notices, right? When you can't get online, it's really obvious. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like luckily there's also a lot of innovation happening kind of in many companies regarding like database technology, where you can actually nowadays like do these kind of things that you can say it's not only available for, let's say, big companies like Netflix and kind of Amazon, but like other smaller companies as well, that you can actually have like data sovereignty in the database. So you can say that, hey, this data needs to live here. So, but it's important to take that into consideration when you're starting it, because like migrating to a totally different, let's say, data layer solution later on is quite expensive. And kind of I think nowadays because like even the European founders, when you're starting a company, you of course maybe start from here, but then quite soon you want to kind of go to US market. So then if you don't have these things in place, you might end up into let's say problems later on, for sure. Elliot, you had some question from your end you wanted to ask Chris. You wanted to go now?
You guys actually got into it when this was going back a ways, talking about the way that the CISO and the CTO can work together throughout these different stages of growth to implement cybersecurity programs at different stages of maturity. But I'll tell you what, I think we're nearing the end of our time here, guys. Is there any final question or a final point that we want to get to here? And if there's anyone in the audience who's been burning but too shy to ask a question, this is your Bueller moment. Okay.
Well, I have a question for Chris. So like now we have the founders online listening. We had some questions about like different aspects of building cybersecurity. So what would be like the top advice where to get kind of a blueprint for building the cybersecurity into the startup? What would you recommend? What do you recommend to read?
That is a great question. Obviously, my book. There's two other books I really love. Another one, How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity. Doug Hubbard and Richard Seierson wrote that book. Really fantastic. I think helps give you a more grounded way of addressing cybersecurity risk and figuring out how to take those risks in your organization. And then I'd say those would probably be my top two. Maybe a third one if you want to get my viewpoint of the opposite of metrics, which we talked about earlier, tyranny of metrics, not cybersecurity related whatsoever. But I think just a really good general book founders should read because metrics are so important. Different types of metrics at those early stages. To make sure you're picking the right ones at the right time. I think it's really easy to pick ARR and say, triple, triple, double, 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 right? That type of stuff. But when you get past that, right, then what, right? So, those would be my three.
Excellent. So I at least got that one new book to my book backlog, and I highly recommend everyone reading kind of Chris's book. Even if you're, let's say, you don't need to be a founder, you could be in the technology team, or even like the board level to understand, like, okay, what are the kind of things you should ask? And as you mentioned, like you kind of, Chris, like VCs are a little bit asking or kind of giving you feedback. So I think like everyone who is let's say working with any type of startups, because everything is digitalizing nowadays, and kind of security is and the privacy is kind of the basic part of that basic building block of companies of future. So kind of highly recommend picking up that book, and it's a very compact and full of information.
Right. Totally agree, everybody. Pick it up. If you don't win it, if you don't have it already, it's really worth reading. These lessons are applicable to everybody. And it's also really beautiful on the shelf. As you can see behind Chris, it really kind of lights up the whole bookshelf. So really a beautiful cover. People don't talk about that enough with these cybersecurity books, but this is something that's going to make you look smart and feel smart.
Picking the cover was really fun because I actually went to Barnes & Noble and went to the security section and looked to see what the dominating color was, and most were blues, in the blue range. So I tried to pick something that would stand out.
Yeah, the gold standard. I'll tell you, that's what you got here now.
I love it.
All right. Well, hey, Chris and Pyry, it's been an absolute pleasure for me to sit back and hear you guys talk. Two experts, you're both rowing the same direction, but you're not necessarily on the same team all the time. So it's really great to have learned from you both. I think everybody would agree too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, good evening, and good day, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye, right? Bye.
Bye.